Tonight, 7 questions the Liberals refuse to answer about Syrian refugees. It's November 20th. You're watching The Ezra Levant Show.
Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government for why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
So Justin Trudeau has made his announcement about bringing in 25,000 Muslim migrants from Syria all in the next month. Well, it's not quite accurate. He hasn't made an announcement. His staff have anonymously leaked tidbits of information to their most reliable friends in the media. Just stop and think about that for a moment. It's a momentous change in Canadian immigration policy, to Canadian security policy, and it's all been done just days after the Islamic State massacres in Paris, the largest attack on the West since 9/11. And Trudeau doesn't have the respect for democracy to even announce his changes, let alone allow for any debate or amendment. He just leaks tidbits. Provincial premiers are begging for information. Social welfare agencies, police forces are begging for information. Mere citizens who will have to live next to these Muslim migrants are begging for information, especially about security and health concerns. But Trudeau is above any of that. What did you believe? His campaign comments about transparency and open government and doing things differently? Oh, and look at this in the National Post. The officials did not want to be identified because diplomats and immigration officers have been told by Ottawa not to speak about the matter, with all requests referred to the government. Unfortunately, I have nothing to say to you at the moment, Immigration Canada spokesman Jean-Bruno Villeneuve said in an email from Ottawa, adding that he was unable to confirm any details about the resettlement program, unquote. Isn't that funny? I could swear just a few weeks ago, Trudeau promised that he would unmuzzle civil servants and let them speak, especially on controversial matters where evidence and facts were important, such as, how do you screen 1,000 Muslims from Syria a day when the process normally takes 10 months? It was all a ruse in complicity with the media party. These 25,000 unvetted Muslim migrants will be rammed down Canada's throat in the face of democratic opposition, security risks, legal risks, health risks. I have read the leaked reports. 900 Syrians will be flown to Canada every single day until Christmas. Every day. Why? What's the rush? What is so urgent, so suddenly, that basic medical screening for communicable diseases can't even be done, let alone background checks for security? It normally takes 10 months for a proper background check on a refugee. There are not even 900 CSIS agents who would be available to screen these migrants total, let alone CSIS agents who speak Arabic. Why would you bring them in unvetted to Canada? Why would you literally invite the wolves in with the lambs? Why wouldn't you screen them first? Those are political questions, moral questions, but there are technical questions too. And by just leaking scraps of details to compliant journalists, Trudeau and his ministers avoid having to answer these questions. And like I say, they've muzzled their civil servants. Here are just a few of the questions. The first one, the most obvious, what security checks will be done on these Muslim migrants from Syria? What is the security checklist? What paperwork is required from them? And how is that verified? What databases are checked? And what if a migrant simply says he has no papers? They were all lost in the war. Will the Syrian government's records be consulted? What if the Syrian government claims someone is a terrorist or just a criminal? Will we ignore that information just because we don't like Syria's dictatorship? What are the standards here? Are there any standards? What is done where there are no records at all? How would that person be screened? How is ID checked? I mean, these are the Liberals who believe Muslims can vote in Canada while wearing a face-obscuring niqab. Will we even ask to see the faces of these migrants? My second question is, what other screening is being done? It's one thing for a migrant to have not committed any violence before, but what if they simply hold beliefs that are fanatical? As I've shown you before, the Arab Center for Research and Public Policy Studies surveyed 900 Syrians in refugee camps and found that 31% are against any war on the Islamic State. 37% are against the US-led military coalition of which Canada is a part. And 41% of these Syrian refugees say Israel or the United States are the greatest threat to their security. Only 11% say radical Islam is. So putting aside whether or not these refugees are violent themselves, what if they simply hate us? No violence, at least not yet. What if they just plain old despise the West, blame the West, despise our liberal values, our belief in the separation of mosque and state? What if they hate Jews, hate rival Muslim sects, hate, but nothing that shows up in a Google search about them? Are we screening for illiberal views at all? Why am I even asking? You know we're not. Here's my third question, some technical questions that would be asked if Trudeau made a proper announcement, properly briefed provinces, cities, hospitals, etc. Again, it's why he leaked to his fanboys in the press gallery instead of having a news conference. Here's a question. What health tests were taken? What communicable diseases were tested for? And how can you put 1,000 people on the plane every day? Did you even wait for the tests to come back? Seriously, what health labs are even available over there in the squalid refugee camps? What psychological illnesses were tested for? What post-traumatic stress disorder was tested? I mean, these people are allegedly coming from a terrorist war zone. Perhaps they themselves were violent or suffered from violence. How many mental patients are we now pouring into Canada's mental hospitals? How many Canadian military vets suffering from PTSD themselves will now be bumped to the back of the line? What if someone has a major health issue, a major disability, and they will immediately become a lifelong burden on our healthcare system? Will we simply put that Syrian migrant ahead of Canadians in the hospital waiting line? A fourth question, have any Muslim migrants already arrived in Canada? If so, how many? Where are they? On what terms? We don't even know that. Question 5, how many Muslim migrants have registered with Canada in some way? And where have they registered from? How were they chosen? Out of the hordes of people in Lebanon, Turkey, Jordan, Syria itself, Iraq even, how did we choose? Or did they choose us? Did we choose them? Was it done Angela Merkel style? First come, first serve, survival of the fittest, mainly young single men? Were young men allowed to sign up if they were single by themselves? Question 6, what changes were made to our regular refugee policies? What health changes, and most importantly, what security changes? There is simply no way that a system that took nearly a year to process a refugee in the past could be sped up to 1,000 refugees a day without rules being changed, standards being dropped, checklists being abandoned. What is the list of those changes that were made? And what did the experts in our government say about those changes? CSIS, the RCMP, Interpol, our Canadian Armed Forces, our immigration experts, our health experts. Or were these experts even consulted? You know, the ones who have been muzzled? Question 7, as you know, John McCallum, the immigration minister, has conceded the obvious. These Muslim migrants will not be vetted before they arrive here. They'll be vetted partly before and partly after they're here. But the thing about Canadian law is that if a foreigner is brought to Canada, if he can touch his foot down here, he can fight deportation even if he is found out to be a criminal, even if he's found out to be a terrorist. You can't just put him back on a plane and send him back. He can fight endlessly through endless appeals. And our far-left judges have already ruled that sending someone back to a war zone, even if they're a convicted terrorist, violates the terrorist's human rights. We are literally stuck with them. Don't tell me the Liberals don't know this. I put it to you, they're counting on this. And that is the reason why the Liberals are rushing to get this all done by Christmas. What the rest of the country, what the rest of the world doesn't understand, finds so odd, finds so risky, is specifically why the Liberals like this plan. They know that what they're doing is reckless and dangerous. They know that if they actually followed an evidence-based approach to policy, following rules and systems, listening to experts, doing background checks, they know that many of the people they want to bring over won't be allowed to come over because they're just too risky. So they'll just bring them over anyways. And whether or not they pass the screenings after they're here doesn't matter. They're stuck in Canada now. That's the Liberal plan. This is not a bug to them. It is a feature of the plan. It is the only reason why they're rushing. It's the only way the rush makes sense. It's the only way they can bring their 25,000 Muslim migrant men over. Oh, did I say 25,000? Yeah, that was for 2015. January is the beginning of a new year. Another 25,000. and then another 25,000 in 2017. What, are you surprised? Why on earth do you think it's going to stop? Stay with us for more after this break.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know TheRebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to TheRebel.media/store to find out more.
Welcome back to the Ezra Levant Show. That's me. And joining us now via Skype from Edmonton is our Alberta Bureau Chief, Sheila Gunn Reid. Hey, Sheila, great to have you on the show.
Hi, Ezra. Thanks for having me.
Well, you have done such important work. I'm here in Toronto, but I feel like my heart is still that of a Westerner. And so my heart hurts when I see what's being done to that province. Let me say this. I acknowledge that low oil prices have a large impact on Alberta's fortunes. But I look at other oil-producing jurisdictions like Texas, like North Dakota, or even other parts of the world. They're still booming. It's only Alberta where the low oil prices have been hit with additional political penalties of tax increases, royalty reviews, global warming threats, minimum wage hikes. It's really an NDP war against the industry that was already hurting.
Well, it is a made in Alberta recession when we see Alberta companies pulling out investment from Alberta and redirecting it to Texas because Texas offers all those things that Alberta doesn't. Texas doesn't have a carbon tax, Texas has a stable royalty regime, and Texas has low corporate tax rates. So why would you do business with us? We just aren't a business-friendly regime right now.
You know, I was reading the press releases of companies like Shell and Husky when they were pulling out of their Alberta projects. And, I mean, Shell is such a huge company. It does business all over the world. It's doing business in Africa. It's doing business in the Middle East. It finds those places less risky. And I think it was Husky that said it can make a profit at $40 oil. It can make a profit at $30 oil in other jurisdictions, but it is getting out of Alberta. And tell me now, there's news today, Sheila, there's news today of what this flight, this capital flight, companies pulling up stakes and saying, we're out of here. What is the news from an employment insurance point of view in Alberta?
Well, this afternoon I did pull up the numbers. Alberta, since last month, has seen a 9.1% jump in our unemployment rates. In Calgary alone, over the last year, their unemployment insurance claims have jumped 95%. Province-wide is even more catastrophic. We have a 99% change year over year in our unemployment insurance claims.
So it's double. It's double.
It's double.
And these are stats from the province itself, of course, published by the province and, of course, collected by Statistics Canada. Alberta, by far, has the skyrocketing employment insurance problem in the whole country. I mean, we used to think of Newfoundland and Atlantic provinces as being employment insurance areas, but it's Alberta that dominates the pack this time, isn't it?
You know what, that's funny. I pulled the numbers on Newfoundland and Labrador, and they're sitting around 2.2% increase in their employment insurance claims, and Alberta has a 9.1% raise. Little PEI, they actually saw a decrease in their unemployment insurance claims, whereas Alberta, we used to be the job creators and the economic furnace of this country, and we're leading the way in unemployment.
You know, if it was just the oil prices, I think there would be hope. And if it was just the taxes and the penalties that have come in so far, I think business people could plan. But there are three more shoes yet to drop that I can identify. Number one is the Alberta government's royalty review. It was just reviewed a few years ago. Nothing's really changed in the province. There is no way they launched that review without the goal of jacking up the royalty costs. So that's the first shoe. The other is the province's climate change or global warming review. There's no way they're doing that without some sort of carbon tax. And finally, There's the Paris UN Treaty on Global Warming, where both Justin Trudeau and Rachel Notley say they're going to do serious things to the oil patch. So those are three more looming risks. So as if things weren't, so you already have companies bailing out. You have about 100,000 jobs lost so far, because those companies were not willing to stick around and watch the next three shoes drop. But there's some companies that just can't pull up stakes and leave. If you've got a huge oil sands mine, you're in it for 20, 30 years. You can't pull up and go, am I right?
Well, and that's the truth. And the new Environment Minister, Catherine McKenna, has said she's looking for hard carbon targets for Alberta, and she's not backing off that. We have 58,000 people unemployed, and her biggest concern is climate change. That's not what people on the street in Alberta are talking about. They're talking about job losses. We really don't care. People need jobs. They really don't care about the weather right now.
I got one last question for you, Sheila, and it's this. The NDP didn't happen to Alberta. Alberta did it to itself. Albertans voted for the NDP. They didn't get a majority of the vote, but in our first past the post system, they won. They won fair and square by the rules. A lot of Edmontonians, a lot of people in northern Alberta who work for oil and gas voted for the NDP, and I know why, because the Jim Prentice PCs were a disgrace. They were so crooked, and the Wild Roast looked like it had been dissolved by Danielle Smith. I get it. Do you think that those people who had jobs in oil and gas and support industries, and those in coal who are about to be wiped out, do you think they regret voting for the NDP, or do you think they're still holding on and saying, no, I didn't do anything wrong? Do you think they are willing to acknowledge that they brought this disaster into the province?
Do you know what, Ezra? If I could find a single person who'd admit to voting for the NDP, I'd love to ask them. So I guess that's indicative of the regret people feel.
Yeah. Sheila Gunn Reid, our Alberta Bureau Chief, you're doing great work up there in northern Alberta. Thank you for joining us. Have a great weekend, my friend.
You too, Ezra. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Folks, stick around after the break. More of the Ezra Levant Show.
We've heard you loud and clear. You can't get enough Canadian conservative news and opinion. Why not check out our blog? It's all your favorite conservative bloggers together on a page called The Megaphone. Go to TheRebel.media/TheMegaphone or click on the Megaphone menu from our main page to check it out.
Welcome back to the Ezra Levant Show. We love following Donald Trump because he's so entertaining. But beneath the entertainment, there are some very serious policy issues that have been ignored for so long in the United States. And with the recent mania for bringing Syrian refugees to North America, they're relevant to Canada too. So I was very interested when a smear emerged on the internet claiming that Donald Trump had called for some sort of national registry of Muslims. And immediately Trump's critics said it was like wearing a Jewish Star of David. I thought, oh, brother, did Donald Trump put his foot in it again? And then I read a column by our next guest, my old friend Joel Pollak, the senior editor-at-large for Breitbart.com. And he joins us now from Los Angeles. Great to see you again.
Good to be with you again.
Now, I read the tweets, even like Chuck Todd, very senior, legacy media reporters are saying this is a proposal by Donald Trump to register Muslims. So they're saying it's something he believes in, and he's put forward a proposal, positively embracing it. And heck, if, senior NBC people say this, it's got to be true. You actually said, well, let's find the videotape. And what did you find?
Well, you have to actually go back to the original interview by Yahoo News, which asked him about his policies towards Syrian refugees and ISIS and so forth. And then Trump made a few comments about that. Then the Yahoo reporter asked Trump, in his own words, whether he would want a database of Muslims. And Trump did not respond. The Yahoo reporter just says Trump didn't rule it out. That then became the basis for the feeding frenzy. CNN then asked Trump about this Muslim registry idea. Trump said, I have no idea what you're talking about. They quoted the interview. He said, yes, but I didn't answer the question. I didn't choose to answer that question. And then it goes on from there. NBC then asks Trump about it. He misinterprets, apparently, a question from NBC. thinking they're asking him about illegal immigrants or Syrian refugees when he's talking about a registry. He answers enthusiastically as if he's talking about Muslims already in the country or U.S. citizens. And then NBC says, well, isn't this like what the Nazis did to the Jews? And suddenly Trump realizes that NBC has an entirely different agenda, and then he declines to answer any more questions and walks away. But then you have media piling on saying, would Trump want an agency to implement this registry and so forth? It's one of those crazy stories where the mainstream media thinks they're going to land a knockout blow against Donald Trump by inflating something he said, in this case, actually putting words in his mouth he didn't say. And the videotape is actually something that critics of Trump have been pointing to as evidence, because he does talk there about going to places to register Muslims and things like that. But it's clear he's answering a question he believes is about illegal immigrants or about refugees or people who are not yet U.S. citizens. It's a border question in his mind. It's hard to know what's going on in Donald Trump's mind, but the full context of his answer makes it pretty clear that he thinks it's an immigration question, a border question, where the questioner is deciding to interpret it as a question about Muslims already in the United States. So it's an old school left-wing media hit that's going to go nowhere. If you hated Trump already, you'll hate him even more, because you say, well, he should have declined to answer the question more forcefully, or he should have dismissed it out of hand, or should have been clearer. But it's really hard to say that in this instance and in others like it, because the media have basically copied one another, linked to one another, created this little internal, hermeneutically sealed dialogue amongst themselves about just how big a Nazi Donald Trump is. It's one of those, when did you stop beating your wife type of questions. And Trump, I think, wisely addressed it in a recent tweet where he said, the idea of a Muslim registry wasn't mine, it was a reporter's. And then he went on just to talk about his policies for ISIS, and that was the end of that. I don't think it's going to be the end of it in terms of what other people in the media say, what his opponents might say, what Hillary Clinton has said, seizing on this, as if she didn't use incendiary rhetoric, not just about Muslims in the past, but about Republicans, calling Republicans terrorists and things like that. It's par for the course when you're dealing with a media that's as committed to opposing conservatives and Republicans as ours is. And I think Trump realized he walked into a buzzsaw. He could have been more careful. He could have listened more carefully to the question, perhaps. And that's a character flaw. Maybe his policy lends itself to misinterpretation. That's a policy critique. But certainly he did not say that he wants to create a registry of Muslims who are living in the United States legally or as citizens. And the left-wing distortions of this story, that he wanted Muslims to carry ID badges and so forth, are just so off the wall. But they're getting passed around Facebook because they're very shareable on social media. And that's part of the age we live in. It's hard to separate truth from fiction. I think in this case it falls flat because there's nothing in Trump's demeanor to indicate that he would do this kind of thing. It doesn't strike a chord with his character, where there are some false reports that sometimes stand up over time, even if they're false, because they reinforce a public perception of who a person is. But I think that Trump, for all his bombast and his rhetoric about immigration and stuff like that, doesn't really come through as a kind of fascist leader in the way it would be required to implement that kind of a database. I mean, it's just not who he is. It's not part of his persona. Other things he has said are probably more open to critique. I've been critical of his policies on Russia, for example, where he seems to think all you need to do to solve our Russia problem is get along with Vladimir Putin, and Putin will like him more because he's a man's man and Obama's not. So therefore Putin will respect him. I mean, I think that's kind of a ludicrous argument, and that's what Trump's been saying. So, we're not shy about criticizing him when we think he does something silly. But this was really just a media hit where the media were setting this up for themselves and enjoying themselves, actually, thinking they were taking him down. Trump's not going to go away until conservative voters decided they've had enough of him. If and when that happens, he'll fade. But every time they do this, Trump just gets stronger.
I think you're right. And I think there's two reasons. First of all, in many ways, Trump is bigger than anyone who takes a run at him in the media. He's bigger than Yahoo News, for sure. Bigger than any of the networks. And so his reputation is bigger. He can withstand it. And more than that, the fact that the media hates him and he doesn't blink, I think people love that about him more than anything else, because I think conservatives are sick of cowering to the media, of apologizing to the media. And frankly, this is how I feel about Trump, Joel. I think he goes too far on certain things. I think he's wrong on certain things. But his core instinct of being a fighter and saying, I don't even care what my critics say, is more valuable to me, because I see that's what's missing in every other conservative in the United States and most in Canada. We got to wrap this up, but last word to you. Do you think the Syrian refugee crisis added to the Mexican immigration crisis is enough to propel Donald Trump to success in the upcoming primaries and caucuses?
I think it will help him in certain respects. I think winning the primary is a very different thing from leading the polls, as we've discovered in several recent elections. I do think it will help him because he's projecting strength. It's more his refusal to back down that I think is drawing voters to Donald Trump. Even in Iowa, where, a week ago he said, "How stupid are the people of Iowa?" And he's still on top of the polls in Iowa. I mean, it's kind of really unseen. We haven't seen something like this, at least in my recent memory. But it's that idea that he doesn't back down. And I think people are looking for that in an American leader. We are a country beset by many challenges, as you pointed out, not just Syrian refugees, but immigration, not just immigration, but economic decline. I mean, there's actually a net out-migration of Mexicans. We still have people coming across the border illegally, but we're net negative because our economy is still struggling so badly that migrants are looking for jobs outside the United States, not inside the United States. So, we have a variety of challenges, and people feel that only a very strong person is going to be up to those challenges. I think Hillary Clinton projects strength. She certainly has been around a long time. People know her. I think Donald Trump is seen by many Republicans as the alternative to beat Hillary, because if there's anyone stronger than Donald Trump takes them on. And I think that's his appeal and part of his persona.
Great to talk with you again. And congratulations on Breitbart.com, which is in many ways a role model and inspiration for us up here at TheRebel.media. You keep up the fight down there, my friend. We'll take care of things north of the 49th.
All right, thank you. Take care.
See you later. Stay with us, folks. More to come after the break.
So open-minded that the brains have fallen out.
What's the point that you're making?
The point that I'm making is that if you're going to propose a massive overhaul to the way the economy is developed in terms of carbon tax, cap and trade, other forms like that, it helps to have some science that is in fact settled.
I love reading my viewer feedback. You can email at Ezra@TheRebel.media or tweet me at Ezra Levant, just on Twitter. Here's some comments. Polly Tix said, Ezra is such an idiot. They're screened before, even on planes. Don't let facts get in the way of racism. Comment on screening Syrian refugees. Look, it's not racist to screen someone coming from a terrorist war zone. It's not racist to screen them for terrorism. It's called national security, and these people aren't just coming to visit. They are being literally invited to live with us forever. No more than that, they're being queue-jumped ahead of everyone else in line. They're not just being given priority, they're coming in with literally lower standards than normally. It normally takes 10 months to vet a refugee from a war zone. 1,000 a day will be imported by Trudeau. Radical Islam, by the way, is not a race. You have Muslim terrorists who are black, Muslim terrorists who are brown, Muslim terrorists who are white, more and more converts. The commonality is not the race, it's the radical Islam, or Islamism, which believes that religion isn't just a personal faith, it's a totalitarian ideology for the whole world. So try that racism shtick on someone else, please. The Dude tweets, we turned away Jews during World War II and they ended up in concentration camps. We are supposed to learn to be better from history. Clever point, except for the Jews weren't blowing up Westerners in suicide missions. Jews weren't spraying nightclubs with machine guns. Jews were the victims of the Nazis. In your analogy, you're trying to portray radical Muslims as today's Jews. Yeah, no, radical Muslims are the Nazis of our era. Now, I acknowledge that not all Muslims support terrorism, though a large number do, as we saw earlier in the show. And not all Muslims support extreme Islam, like Sharia law, gender apartheid for women, Muslim supremacy over other religions. But a lot do. So this would be like Canada, to use your analogy, it would be like Canada in the 1940s taking German refugees during World War II. Yeah, I'd say take some German refugees, but only if all the Nazis or Nazi sympathizers or Nazi spies were vetted first. And you can't do that at the rate of 1,000 a day, as Trudeau pretends he can. Here's the next tweet from Martin. who says, Ezra, thanks for asking the questions our media doesn't dare to. The total lack of critical thinking amongst Muslims is mind-boggling. Thanks, Martin. You just can't trust the mainstream media. Other than extremely basic facts, what day is it? What city did the bombs go off? You just can't trust them. Everything else is spin. We have our biases too, of course, but we acknowledge them and we label them opinions. We don't put them in headlines as facts like the media party does. Colleen White says, we don't listen to Ezra Levant in Canada. Why the hell would they in Paris? He's an effing dweeb. Oh boy, effing dweeb, eh? That's low. You went there. Snap, effing dweeb. You put me in my place. Look, I'm joking. You know, in the past week, our little news network has been criticized by the Ottawa Citizen, the National Post, and even by the TV critic of the Globe and Mail. We've been belittled. An effing dweeb. Someone called us a web zine. That's what the Citizen called us. A blog, as another magazine called us. And Colleen here thinks no one listens to us. Obviously, she does, and the others do too. I feel like we're starting to make a bit of a difference, don't you? We're not being ignored anymore. Know what I mean? I mean, it goes up and it goes down, but we're getting about 100,000 visits a day, which is more than CTV News Channel gets in their ratings and as much as CBC News Network does on any given day. I love the fact that the Globe and Mail's TV critic, John Doyle, is taking shots at us. I mean, Globe and Mail, a print newspaper that's dying, and he's a TV critic in a print newspaper. Do they even have TV critics anymore? I didn't think they did. In a print newspaper? That's amazing. Next thing you'll tell me is the Candlestick Makers Union is criticizing those whippersnappers in the light bulb business. Listen, I'm not getting too big for my britches. We are still a little startup living from paycheck to paycheck, figuring things out as we go on a shoestring budget. But I like the fact that we're not being ignored anymore. We're being attacked now by the big boys, literally every day. Think about that. That's the finest compliment these critics could ever pay us. Last comment from Risa Rosen, who tweeted, Ezra, great coverage in France. You provide a deep analysis that we aren't seeing anywhere else. Please cover other big events. Thanks, Risa. It was an adventure. It stretched our modest resources. But even with our shoestring budget, we were able to be there to ask the questions the mighty CBC and CTV didn't ask. Not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't. They're too politically correct. Well, that's our show for today. Have a great weekend. We're back with the Ezra Levant Show on Monday. Let me tell you, next week, we're going to have some interesting Conservative MPs on the show. Haven't really talked to Conservatives in a month, but it's been a month since the election is over. So what's the future of the Conservative Party? Who's going to run for the leadership? How does it rebuild? Does it listen to the media who says, oh, don't be a vigorous opposition, be more polite now? Isn't it fun that they only tell Conservatives to be polite in opposition and never left-wingers? Will the party tack left, tack right? What will it do? We'll have some talent on the show from that party. I'll ask people if they're going to run. I don't want to give away the names. I'll save that for next week. For now, let me just say thanks for watching. Thanks to all our staff here at TheRebel.media who put on great shows when we were out gallivanting in Paris. They were working here till very late to make it all happen. Thanks to the team. Have a great weekend, everybody. Keep coming back to The Rebel for our video bits and bites, but this long-form show is on holiday till Monday. Good night, everybody.